Sounds good, very positive. So welcome on behalf of the Social Justice Committee and the Green Sanctuary of the Universalist Church of West Hartford. Tonight's program is a monthly program, and we're very proud to have joined together because our subject this evening for the first hour is environmental justice. I think we're all familiar with the term justice. We're in a church setting and so forth, that we have been familiar with many years with that term. But the term environmental justice is quite new, at least for our ears, I think. And I think as we move forward in about a half a year, we're going to have completed our learning journey where we're learning different things about climate change and the different facets. We want to have a really clear idea what we mean by environmental justice, and not just academically, but what we've invited Sharon Lewis here for is to help us have a picture in our mind and stories in our mind that we can always call upon when we want to understand how it is that we are going to find solutions in the next few years here at the Universalist Church on bringing the greenhouse gases down, and then also having an opportunity to figure out how environmental justice can also fit in with that. And that will be our objective, to find real practical solutions that we all can do. And whether you're coming in from another church today, or if you're here at the Universalist Church, or maybe you're just in West Hartford and heard about this talk that way, we welcome all hands on deck, because with climate change, there is no room for being the individualist church in any way. We have to all gang together. And I'd like to just introduce very briefly, Sharon Lewis has a wonderful bio, and I'll mention things that I think just stand out to me. Born and raised during the civil rights movement, and that has to be in your bones, and you've been very impressed with women that have sort of shown you the way.
Absolutely.
And then you went to Mount Holyoke College and got both your undergraduate and graduate work there, and then went on to be an insurance and reinsurance executive. And for 20 years, you were rising up the ladder, so to speak. And then you had to respond to the Love Canal situation, the environmental situation. And at that point, you clearly saw that there was a very different response and a very different reaction for people that needed to get money back from that situation, that were white and that were Black. And at that point, I think you came to the conclusion that your next part of your life really could be used in the bringing together civil rights and the understanding of environment and insurance.
Actually, no, I had no idea. I knew, I saw the racism, I saw the differences, but I didn't make that connection to environmental justice until 10 years later.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I'm going to then just say one more thing that I think is very interesting to all of us, and that is that Sharon chairs the Connecticut Zero Waste Coalition.
Yes.
And is very involved in the whole recycling, reducing, and reusing. And as we Mira is being closed down, and we are looking at how are we going to contend with all the garbage we create, which is an environmental justice issue. It is an issue for all of us, and for climate change too, because of the methane that's created in putting putting all that garbage together and or burning it. So I think that those are just a few things that I wanted to mention, and I'm going to let you speak.
And thank you for keeping it brief. Only because I paid someone to write that. None of it is true, and it's very embarrassing to hear it again.
And then in an hour, we are going to move over to the West Hartford Climate Project and hear about some youth-initiated project that is also something dear and near to our hearts. So I'm going to let Sharon go on in the direction of environmental justice, and I'll just move aside. To give you a
Okay,
little
thank
bit of
you.
room.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure for me to talk to people about environmental justice. You will, if you get to know me, you know that I do talk a lot, and you'll have to stop me. That's why I have my stopwatch already set. But I'm going to try something different tonight. Normally, I have slides and I put on a presentation. And I've been doing this for about 25 years, talking about environmental justice. But only since COVID have I been Zoom crazy every other day, Zoom, Zoom, Zoom. And I'm sure that everybody is zoomed out and don't want to see another PowerPoint presentation. And I thought to myself, after doing so many Zoom presentations, it doesn't appear as though I'm making a difference. I want to do something different. So I said, well, let's make this more conversational. Let's not do the slides. For one reason, the slides are very emotional for me. I happen to choose slides that make me cry every time I see them, or every time I read a newspaper article about something that happened 50 years ago, it really hits me seriously. So I'm just being selfish. The slides affect me deeply. But I want you to imagine a picture of what I'm saying as I talk. And I will tell you from the beginning that my environmental justice curriculum is very long. It's 5 parts. So we can't do environmental justice by, or you can't learn about environmental justice by just listening to somebody talk for an hour. It's much deeper than that. So please bear with me as I do an abbreviated version of what I hope you invite me back to talk in greater length about. Some people think, I'm sure you think that I'm going to be talking to you about the origins of the environmental justice movement. I am not. I'm not going to talk to you about Warren County, North Carolina, where they say the environmental justice movement began. I'm not going to talk to you about the predominantly Black community that protested the federal government and the EPA that allowed the dumping of PCBs and other hazardous waste in their community, where their water table was very shallow and their lives and their livelihood was threatened because the chemicals were in the water. So I'm not going to be telling you about that. I'm not going to tell you about the United Church of Christ that did a study called Toxic Waste and Race. And this study revealed, or I say exposed, the fact that in the southern states, 3 out of 4 hazardous waste sites were located in communities of color. Nor am I going to tell you that 20 years later, they did another report, which showed that there were very little changes, in fact, no changes. One of the major things that came out of the 20-year later report was that we discovered that race, not income, was the primary factor for where the siting of polluting facilities were located. Race, not income. So a lot of people describe environmental justice as being affecting low-income communities of color. That is not correct. It is low-income and communities of color. Low-income whites and communities of color of any income. These are the people who are exposed to environmental injustices. And there are reasons for that, but I'm not going to tell you about those right now. I will tell you that people of color are disproportionately affected and exposed to life-altering pollution, but you already know that, right? So I'm not going to tell you more about that. But what I do want to tell you is something that you might not know about. And what you might not know about is how all this began. How did we get to where we are? And it doesn't begin with Warren County. It begins with what caused people to think that it was okay to dump these life-altering chemicals in communities where low income and people of color live. What gave them the impression that it was okay, that they're the ones who were the canaries, so to speak, that they're the ones who were ill? What gave people the mindset that it's okay to put it in their backyard, but not their own? Put it anywhere but my backyard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you about how things began in the United States, our story. So you need to understand, as I'm sure you all know, that there was slavery in America for 247 years. And I say that because it really irks me when people say slavery lasted for 400 years. Slavery did not last 400 years. If you just do the math, if it officially ended in 1865, subtract 400 years from that. Didn't happen. 247 years. If 1619 was correct, it's 247 years. And I stress this to say that that's a long time to control people and to affect people's lives. It's a long time. And I will tell you that slavery was much worse than you can imagine, much worse. Because what we read about and hear about is just the iceberg. Think about it. Why would they tell the truth? Every time I do a presentation and leave some type of plaque or something on the wall, and I go back the next day, I can't find it. Oh, I took it off the wall because I don't want the kids to get upset. And that's what historians do. They take it off the wall because if they told the truth, people would be upset. You know, Nat Turner, you know what he did? Can you imagine if people really found out what it was all about, how upset they would be? So I'm very grateful that President Biden has elevated the profile of environmental justice. He's done it better than any president before him. He's done it better than President Clinton and of course the Republicans as well, because it's every day people are talking about environmental justice. And I'm very happy to say that I'm happy to be here to talk to you. And that's why I want this to be transformative, because I've been doing this for so long and something's got to work. So what do I do that's transformative? My husband said, well, you know, he calls me Harriet because of Harriet Beecher Stowe. Harriet Beecher Stowe wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. And it was because of her that for the first time, the world realized that Black people were human. And they were upset. They said, wait a minute, United States, what's going on here? You're coming all over the world talking about all the human and civil rights violations, and you got the biggest human rights violation in your own backyard. What's up with that? And you know, people question whether or not President Lincoln said to Harriet Beecher Stowe when he first met her, so you're the little lady who started this war. I do believe it, because Uncle Tom's Cabin was so popular. Her sales of that book were second only to the Bible. Translated into 24 languages, the world was reading that book and they were shaking their heads like, ain't this a shame? They don't have tails, they bleed, they love their families, they eat like we do. What's going on here? So I say this to say, because the attitudes that exist today that assume that it's okay to put it in our backyard came from those same attitudes. So we just can't start in the middle talking about environmental injustices in 1982, because the injustice comes from up here. It comes from what gives you the thought, what gives you the right to think that it's okay to do this to other people? What have you done in the past to justify your current behavior? Praise the Lord for Harriet Beecher Stowe. And I'm very happy to say my husband can call me Harriet anytime he wants to. And I've been a card-carrying Uncle Tom my whole life, because contrary to what people believe, Uncle Tom was not the man they thought he was. He was the white slave owners' worst nightmare. And that's why they had to flip the script on him. If the slaves did what Uncle Tom did, life would change for us. Things would be totally different, but I digress. So how did we get here? Well, I want to also tell you that today you're hearing about the environmental justice movement involving BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color. But I'm going to focus on the Black experience, because the Black experience in America was unlike any other. The slaves who came to America, the descendants of slaves who came to America, were the only ones in that BIPOC group, beside the Indigenous, who came here not of their own free will. The immigrants came because they wanted to come. The African descendants of slaves did not come here. So why is that important? It's important because of settlement patterns. The immigrants who came later, they lived where their own were. The Mexicans live where the Mexicans live. The Jewish people live where the Jewish people live. You live with your own kind. But the Black people didn't have that choice. They were restricted in movement in every which way possible. See, if you remember, the civil rights movement was all about integration. So the Blacks wanted to go here, there, and everywhere, and they were stopped every way possible. So why is that? If slavery ended in 1865, what's going on? Well, as I learned the hard way as an 18-year-old from my Uncle Bob, I was excited going to college, civil rights movement, all these different changes. I can go to college now. I'm a dark-skinned girl. I can go to Mount Holyoke. Prior to the civil rights movement, I was too dark to go to Mount Holyoke. That's another story. You know, we could vote now. We could own property. My Uncle Bob said, Sharon, laws don't change people. 50 years later, I realized he was right. Laws don't change people. What the whites did was everything they could to bring things back to status quo. They instituted these laws for the former enslaved that made them almost slaves all over again. When you think of the Black codes, when you think of sharecropping, when you think of disenfranchisement, and then the big one, Jim Crow. Now, you all think of Jim Crow as separate but unequal. You know, you think of Jim Crow as, well, you know, separate hospitals, you know, separate movie theaters. My mom was born in Alabama in 1932, and I often heard us tell stories about the Blacks had to be in the crow's nest, which was in the balcony, and the Blacks crow was a term for Black people, and everything was totally separate. But you really don't know about Jim Crow. Did you know that Black people in Alabama and the South could not drink Coca-Cola? Did you know that Black people could not go into a store and try on clothing? Did you know that they could not eat at a restaurant? Now, forget about the lunch counters that you hear about in the civil rights movement. They couldn't go in the front door of a restaurant. You had to go around the back and get your food. And if you were on the sidewalk with a white person facing you, you cannot make eye contact, and you better move off that sidewalk so they can have the right of way. So there's so many other daily indignities that you have no idea about. Richard Williams, who's the father of Venus and Serena Williams, I caught him in an interview a couple of years ago where he said he was from Shreveport, Louisiana. And at 5 years old, he was almost beaten to death by a white man because he touched the man's hand. So I say this to say that during the Great Migration, when millions of Black people left the South, we all think it's because they left for economic opportunity. They did, but the primary reason was to leave and get away from that terrorism, from the Ku Klux Klan and other white terror groups, just like we have here today, numerous white nationalist groups. They want to get away from those daily indignities of Jim Crow, where they couldn't do anything. Daily indignities whereby the 13th Amendment, which officially abolished slavery in December of 1865, it said, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude will exist in America except for criminals. So if you want to put people back into slavery, what do? Make them criminals. Criminalize everything they do. If you don't have a job, you're going to go to jail. You're standing around doing nothing, you're going to go to jail. You look at a white woman and scare her, you're going to go to jail. They will find any other reason to put you in jail. So why is that important? We'll find out soon. Or what does that have to do with environmental justice? We will soon find out. I want you to just visualize. Just think about the stress now. How would you feel if you were a former enslaved person? And forget about the Emancipation Proclamation, because how can you be free and the country still at war? Okay, so April 9th, 1865, finally the war is over. Just imagine yourself. You're free. You're like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? Before you could pack your few bags, whatever you have, 5 days later, Lincoln gets assassinated. Can you imagine? I would say to myself, is this a joke? Like, is somebody punking me? What is going on here? So you can't move, you freeze. And then Vice President Johnson became president. He did everything he could. Within the first month of his presidency, he pushed back all the minor gains Blacks got. The United States did have an attempt at reparations with 40 acres and a mule, where they had given the land that was taken from the Southerners, the Confederates, to the slaves. That was taken away so fast by President Johnson The Freedmen's Bureau, which was supposed to help the former enslaved, he just, in 30 days, he did so much damage. So we could just imagine, like, I better get out of here. I mean, this ain't looking good for me. So millions of Blacks left the South every which way they could. They walked, they took trains, they took buses, they drove in cars. I have a picture, well, no, I saw a picture, which I no longer have, of my uncle who had left Alabama, going south to get my mother and his mother, my mother, his youngest daughter. And there's a picture of him having the refrigerator on top of his car. And there are numerous pictures of people packing all the stuff they have and leaving. And my mother was the youngest of 11. 6 went to Connecticut and 5 went to Chicago. And if you study the migration charts, there were patterns, like people from Alabama and Mississippi went to Chicago, Detroit, and then people from Louisiana went west. And I really don't know why they went north. I really don't, to east, I'm sorry, I have no idea. But understand, a lot of people think that they escaped slavery. No, they didn't. They went north of slavery, east of slavery, west of slavery. Now, why am I saying this? Because they soon found out that when they left the South, things weren't that much different. The NAACP was founded in 1909 in Springfield, Illinois, as a result of lynchings in Springfield, Illinois, not Atlanta, Georgia, not Birmingham, Alabama, not Money, Mississippi, Springfield, Illinois, the land of Lincoln. So things weren't that good. And if they wanted to go into a white neighborhood to live, what would happen? There tended to be just as many lynchings in the North, East, and West as they were in the South. Their houses got firebombed. And forget about jobs. Sure, they got jobs. I'm not saying that they didn't get jobs, because they went to the slaughterhouses and the meatpacking industry in the Midwest. And they went to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which, by the way, a lot of oil was discovered in Oklahoma. A lot of people figured they'd be domestics to rich white folks. But guess what? A lot of Black folks had land that struck oil too, so they became rich too. But think about Tulsa. Whole district called Greenwood burned to the ground. Red Summer, 1919. But guess what? Did you also know that there were more than 25 other cities in 1919 burned down? And they claimed that they were due to Black men raping white women. But as Ida Wells said once, she said, it ain't true now and it wasn't true then. Because if Black men wanted to rape white women, they would have done it while the white men were gone away fighting at the Civil War. It didn't happen. This was an excuse to justify the brutality of hanging someone, of lynching someone. They shot you in the head, they hung you up, they burned you, they cut your body parts out and gave them away as souvenirs. Who does this? That kind of terror? How would you be able to survive this? It's like you're leaving the South and you're pushed into the North and the East and the West, and you're facing just as much terror, and you're trying to make a living, you're trying to survive. You're the lowest paid person. And by the way, Black people had a sort of double jeopardy, because you not only were exposed to hazardous chemicals where you live, but also where you work. You have the most hazardous jobs ever. And if you got killed or injured, there's no such thing as workers' comp. Are you kidding me? They'll just find somebody to replace you. And the thing is, last hired, first fired. That is very, very, very true. Another famous person told the story, Della Reese. I don't know if you know her, but she was a famous Black songstress, actress, and whatever. I caught her in an interview where she said her father, when her family moved to Detroit, her father poured steel, and he worked for 37 years pouring steel in the steel mills. And when he died, they replaced him with a machine, because they said that this is not the kind of job for a human. But it's okay for him, because see, we're not considered human. And see, it all comes to Black lives don't matter. So how did we get to where we are? There are exceptions. There were thousands of people who were able to do what I'm saying that others couldn't do. But when thousands are successful and millions are not, I think it's fair to say that it's okay to generalize that as a whole, it was not a good experience for African Americans, job-wise or housing-wise. If you want to buy a house, number one, the federal government stopped it. federal government's Home Owners Loan Corporation invented redlining. They decided that they're gonna, all over the United States, map out neighborhoods where there was an infestation of Negroes. So where Negroes lived, those areas were red. That meant don't lend them any money to buy, to rent, or to renovate. And the green and the blue areas were the, the business people and the white people. And the yellow areas were kind of, iffy, like we gotta watch these people because they might be black at any moment. By the way, you do know that Italians weren't white until 1940s. See, there's a little known secret, I'm serious, little known secret. The blacks and the Italians got along very well until the Italians became white. And then when the Italians became white, things were different. So I say this to say that my mother had a lot of Italian friends. And when they moved to Hartford, they moved into a new housing complex called Stowe Village, public housing. And they were kicked out. And I'm so glad they were kicked out. They were kicked out because they were married. And my mother's Italian friends bought a house for us right around the corner in a brand new development. There's no way that they couldn't have gotten that house had it not been for her friends. And I say this to say that it was rough. And that's one of the reasons why there are so many wealth disparities all throughout the United States. But let me back up a little bit because as Sabrina mentioned, I spent 22 years in the insurance and reinsurance industry. And I'm very disappointed in the fact that when it comes to owning up to issues, the banking industry has said, we've done it. We know, we've redlined, but the insurance industry has not. And I'm very disappointed because my first exposure with redlining was with the insurance industry. Think about it. Insurance is just as important as having a bank account. If your house burns down, you have no insurance, you lose everything. If your family member dies, you have no insurance, you got to scrape up pennies and dimes and quarters to cremate someone because you can't have a typical funeral that you're normally customary to have. So insurance is very important, but the insurance industry has not come forward. And I'm very disappointed with that. So why am I saying all this? Because you need to understand that it's all about finances. It's all about being able to, it's all about creating wealth. So how do we create wealth in America? The quickest and the most common way is through real estate. But if you're not allowed to buy anything, if you're not allowed to own anything, there is no such thing as generational wealth. And this is what happened to African Americans in the United States. When I was traveling all over the US, I would tell the cab drivers, take me to where Black people lived. And everywhere I went, I could close my eyes and not know where I am. I could be in Chicago and think I'm in Detroit. I could be in Detroit and think I'm in Hartford. I could be in Hartford and think I'm in Buffalo. Why? Because they all looked alike. Either the neighborhoods were run down, there was no economic development, people were caged in high-rise housing projects, or the Black areas were always slummy and uninviting. And then everybody had the same diseases. Everybody had cancer. Everybody had heart disease. Everybody had diabetes. And people would say, oh, it runs in our family. And I used to often say, maybe it ain't necessarily so. Maybe we all have the same jobs. I wasn't even thinking about the environment at that time. I just thought that maybe everybody had the same job. But then I looked at my own family and I said, wait a minute, we're all over the place. Some of us are corporate people, some of us are not. Well, why do I have diabetes too? Why do I have heart trouble too? Why can't I breathe too? I realized it was because of where we lived, because we were so restricted in our movement. Because every time we tried to buy a piece of property in a decent neighborhood, there was such serious pushback. White people rioted in the streets. We're not having you living next to us. Well, why not? I don't know, but we just don't want you living next to us. People's houses got burned down. People's dogs got poisoned. And the white people who helped them, they suffered too. In fact, there were restrictive covenants on people's deeds that stated you cannot rent to a Black person. Black person cannot spend the night in this house unless they are a servant. And if you sell to a Black person, you're going to suffer the consequences. And guess who supported all this? The federal government. Federal government told contractors and developers that you must do this, or we're not going to insure your loan. We're not going to insure your mortgages. So the federal government decided to build these high-rise complexes. Well, they call them projects. Complex is too nice a word. Call them projects. High-rise. Well, think about this. I call them the new plantations. There are several notorious projects in the United States. Chicago, Illinois has two that make me shudder. Cabrini Green, which is no longer there, and Robert Taylor Homes. Both of these are massive, massive, huge, tall plantations. Robert Taylor Homes was 11 16-story buildings. 11 16-story buildings. Now imagine, you're on the 16th floor and you're watching your kid get his butt kicked and there's nothing you can do because you're so far away. So a lot of people insisted that their kids play in the hall. But the hallway is not a place for kids to play. And then the federal government realized that these places were too difficult or too expensive to maintain. So they stopped maintaining them. So there was no garbage pickup. Stowe Village in Hartford even had incinerators in the halls where people would drop their trash in the hallway, right down the incinerator. Imagine the fire risk for that. I remember visiting relatives in Chicago, scaring me to death. We walk up 11 flights. And I was a kid, but still it was a lot for me. And I hear this click, 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 click. We get there, we turn around, he's got like 11 deadbolt locks on his door. I'm like, what? I was so scared, I'm like shuddering. I had to go to the bathroom and they were on the top floor and they were like bars. I'm like, oh my God, what is going on here? There was all kinds of crime. Can you imagine just being put in that situation with the crime and with the drug abuse and all the other issues that go along with being caged like an animal? See, people don't understand. You think, oh, well, you know, that's just how they are. Look at all those people, all those babies and children. Where are the fathers? Well, hold on to your seats because I'll tell you where the fathers are. The federal government decided that if you're going to live in public housing, don't forget now, you couldn't get a decent job. So you had no choice but to go to public housing or the street. If you're gonna live in public housing, your husband can't come. Baby daddy can't come. Fathers can't come. See, you didn't know that, did you? Fathers were excluded. And this is why when my parents wanted to go to Stowe Village, when they found out my parents were married and my father had his own business, oh, you got to go. This is not for you. I remember asking people, well, you know, what happened? And they would say that there was this Black cop in Hartford, female cop, and Ella Brown. And her job was to go visit people, open up the closet door. If you see men's clothing there, you'll be talked to. If a man was there, in fact, my husband heard me rehearse this. He says, oh yeah, he says, social worker came to our house one day and told my father that she would find him someplace to go. So you don't have much of a job, can't afford anything but public housing, but your husband cannot go. Imagine. And if you go to, as you, I'm sure you have, go to numerous big cities in the United States, why do they all look alike? I refuse to believe that it was a conspiracy. I refuse till now. Federal government did all this intentionally, put you back into slavery. Now remember I talked about the 13th Amendment, whereby everybody's free except for criminals? They don't do that anymore. They don't tell the fathers that you can't come live with your families in public housing. This is how they do it. If you're a felon, felons can't live in public housing. So you've done your time. You get out of jail, you can't go to where your wife or your family lives because you're a felon. Felons can't vote. Felons can't live in public housing. That little box, are you a felon? Yes, felons can't get a job. And you wonder why so many people go back to jail. And you wonder why so many Black kids have no fathers in the home. The United States federal government, look it up. I'm not lying, look it up. Federal government did all this intentionally. But the most egregious thing, well, not the most, because there's so many mosts. One other egregious thing is that the location of where they put us, they forced us into industrial zones. Do you know that 1 in 7 public housing complexes, the high rises, are located within 2 miles of a Superfund site? And did you know that all these communities are filled with dry cleaners and Jiffy Lubes and auto mechanic shops, none of the things that you see in Avon, Farmington, and West Hartford, but they're all where low income, and people of color live. So why is this important? Because these are the environmental injustices. You know, they're assaulted, because I still live in one, we're assaulted on a daily basis by life-altering pollution in the air, in the water, and the contaminated land. Think about all the lead paint that was used in the high-rise housing complexes. And think how it affected all those children who live there, and you wonder why. In addition to the cognitive issues, a lot of people don't know that lead poisoning leads to aggression. There are so many kids in jail or in juvenile now, and they don't even understand why they're there. Their parents can't control them. Their mothers can't control them. Not at all, because they're not aware that their children have been affected by lead poisoning. And asthma. Hartford, Connecticut has Bridgeport, New Haven, and Hartford. Depending on what year the American Lung Society does its studies, sometimes all three of these cities are in the top 10 of worst places for asthmatics. So what's so special about asthma? It's a childhood disease. Well, if your childhood disease keeps you from going to school, that does affect you. And it's more than you as the child, because don't think for a minute that if your mom brings you to the emergency room that you're not coming too. So you too go to school the next day groggy and sleepy because you've been at the emergency room for 13 hours and you're stressed out because you see your brother or your sister not being able to breathe and they're about to die right in front of your eyes. And this is a daily occurrence because of not only the small single industries that are located where they live, but also the regional facilities are located in these areas. Hartford's Mira is a regional incinerator, which at one time accepted trash from more than half of Connecticut's 169 towns. They brought their trash to Hartford. They didn't have to see all that trash. I live near the North Hartford landfill. I have relatives and friends who live near Mira, and we always compare notes about the trucks that come through dropping trash on our streets all the time. We always compare notes. I lived in the North End where the landfill was, and the crows were bigger than my dogs. And certain days I had to bring them in because I was afraid. In fact, they say that my dog committed suicide. I think a crow ate my dog. I really do. My mother always wanted to protect me. You know, one day, Punky was gone. But anyway, but I mean, I'm very serious. We are exposed to so much that you have no idea, all of the illnesses that we have. And then what really amazes me is that during COVID, all the newscasters, but we don't know why the Black community is so ravaged by COVID. Well, COVID is a respiratory illness, right? And if you have pre-existing respiratory illnesses as a result of breathing all this bad air, then it's logical that a respiratory issue like COVID is going to come take over and destroy you. And once again, people of color and low-income people, who are the essential workers? Who's out there delivering Instacart? Who's out there driving Uber and Lyft? Who's driving the taxis and the buses? Because we have no choice. So here we are exposing our generational families who are living with us. Some people have grandma, grandpa, father, mother, whatever, 2 or 3 generations under one roof. Here you are, you're out there trying to make a living, being exposed to everybody in the world, but you're bringing all that back to your family because you have no choice. And it's really sad because do you ever think about where your trash goes? You know, do you ever think about how it affects people more than the burning of the trash, more than the landfilling of the trash? Like me, all the birds. At one time, a friend of mine talked about all the ash that was all over her house every day, or the fact that her grass wouldn't grow because of the ash in the air that just land. You don't hear about all these other issues, or the smells from the landfill. For years, every time it rained, my basement would get flooded. And when the rain receded, there'd be a white line 4 feet around my basement. Well, organic compounds from the methane that came in from the bottom, the water table where the leachate from the landfill just got into our basements. See, we're exposed to all this, and it's not only our garbage, it's everybody else's garbage. And to me, what the most insulting thing is, people say, oh, these people don't recycle. We're the inventors of recycling. It is just normal for me to call somebody and say, look, I don't need this iPhone anymore. Just yesterday, I gave my iPhone 3 to the boy next door, or I don't need these size 8 sneakers. You know somebody who needs them? We don't throw good stuff away. When you see stuff on the street in the city of Hartford and Bridgeport, Willimantic, whatever, it's garbage. However, I am a vintage person. I want good stuff. Guess where I go? Farmington, Avon, they put good stuff on the street. Good stuff on the streets. You'll be surprised. You go in my house, I got freezers, refrigerators, all kinds of furniture that people put on the street. Only because I don't like it anymore, or I'm changing the decor of my kitchen. Amazing. But then who recycles and who doesn't recycle? So you have to change your mindset. You have to. So these are, some of the environmental injustices that you need to know about. And people always say, well, what can we do? Change your mind, change your heart. Realize that the way things are not because of what we are or who we are. We're not bad people. We love our children. In fact, Michelle Alexander, who wrote the wonderful book called The New Jim Crow, she stated that there are studies that state that Black men, more than any other race, want to communicate with their children when they're in jail, but they cannot. Want to. And just think about it. Think about the damage that the United States government has done by caging people in these new urban plantations and keeping their fathers away and putting people into industrial areas where their lives are also altered with all the exposure to chemicals and toxins. Just, can you live? Just imagine. And it's generational because you can't move out. Let me give an example of what I mean. I grew up in what I thought was an affluent Black community. There were white people in my neighborhood that we took care of. The Blacks drove Benzes and Cadillacs and Buicks, and the whites, many of them didn't even have cars. And yet, guess who moved out first? The whites moved first. How is that possible? On my street, John Clark, the first Black city councilman, a school was named after him, 2 doors down. Spike Johnson, the first Black state representative, Judge Graham. We had doctors, lawyers, politicians, policemen, all over the place. Affluent Black people still living there. And the poor white people were able to leave first. 20 years ago, I drove my Mercedes convertible to the dealership. The head of service was this white boy that I remembered. I'm like, what? He says, no charge. So what are you talking about? He says, had it not been for your mother, we would not have been able to eat. I remember kids coming over. My mother would have barbecues in the backyard. Okay, so every day, but I didn't think anything of it. I just went in the house, did what I needed to do. And there were so many white friends. Just the other day, a kid from Florida, who lives in Florida now, wanted to communicate with me because of something my mother did. I even have policemen, white policemen. I ran through a light once by mistake. He stopped me. He saw my license. He says, are you related to John and Eva Lewis? I said, yeah. He said, oh, no problem. Your mother fed us good. I'm like, okay. So all I'm trying to say is, think about how we got to where we got to. And think about the fact that people say, oh, well, they can just move. No, you can't just move. You can't. People live in the absolute worst conditions possible. And I ask myself, why don't you just move? And then I find out why. My best lead organizer in Bridgeport just got public housing, Section 8, this year. She says, Sharon, it took me 16 years. I said, what are you talking about? She says, you do know I'm a felon, right? No, I did not know you. She says, it took me 16 years. Has it never occurred to you that I never had a place to live? Well, it just didn't occur to me. Not at all. This is how people are forced to live. And it's really, really sad. And environmental justice is not just about pollution. You need to understand that because the federal government ran highways right through neighborhoods. So you have the tailpipe emissions as well. And forget about the lack of economic development, because when you have trucks destroying the roads and the infrastructure, you have no ability to borrow money to even fix up the little piece of property that you may own. And urban renewal, oh my God, I did grow up in the civil rights movement, and I am a city planner by training. And I quickly left that because I thought it was the most racist job I could ever have. Because city planners don't consider anything but themselves. They're the ones who ran those highways right through Black neighborhoods, originally to control the Black neighborhoods and then to damage them with all of the air pollution. Would you have a highway running beside where you live? You'd be out of there so quick. Think about the noise, the accidents you hear all the time, and the air pollution. See, you know about air pollution. A lot of people don't know. A lot of people have no idea. A lot of people don't know that when an incinerator is slated to come to where they live, they have no idea it's an incinerator. They never put incinerator coming near you. They'll say waste to energy plant. I'm like, well, yeah, that sounds pretty good. They're gonna burn trash to create electricity. That sounds good. I'm all for this. And then you get to, what do you mean incinerator? What? Too late. And then the polluters come and say, hey guys, look, forget about what you heard about. We're going to offer you jobs. And I said, wait a minute now. Jobs are going to kill me with that pollution, but I also need a job. Okay, we'll agree to let you come on in. Then they build the building and you're first in line with that application. And then you realize, oh, well, we don't have any openings right now. We filled all the jobs are filled. But you told us that you're going to hire us. See, this is called blackmail, economic blackmail. I call it environmental blackmail, because we agreed to let you come in here because we had to decide between breathing and eating. And we thought we could breathe a little bit longer if we ate a little bit better. And now you're telling us we didn't have a job. Are you kidding? And the few jobs you do have available are the absolute worst job. And then you find out that that incinerator or that sewage sludge plant or that regional landfill is putting me in harm's way. Bridgeport, Connecticut, 50 years ago, little boy was killed. He fell into a sewage sludge vat. Now, sewage sludge that was regional in Bridgeport. Sludge from all other towns came into Bridgeport. They looked like swimming pools. 50 years ago, we didn't have pools in all the schools. I never had a pool in my school. So you have an 18-year-old boy walking along the cement plank. He falls in. So for the first time last week, I actually read the whole article, and I had a hard time getting through it because the headline says, mishap. Can you imagine? Your child is dead, and the headlines, mishap? So I looked up the word mishap. Unfortunate, unlucky. What was unfortunate and unlucky about the fact that you put a sewage sludge plant 20 feet away from a playground? And in the insurance industry, that's called an attractive nuisance. Didn't even have a fence. Even with a fence, kids jump, hey, it's a pool. I'm getting over this, it's a hot day. Even with a fence, how is that a mishap? After 3 days and the removal of 2 million gallons of sewage, they found his body. The sewage sludge plant was built in 1941. P.T. Barnum Housing Complex was built in 1951. So in 1951, they made a decision to put people living within a stone's throw away from a sewage sludge plant where children play. It was located next to the playground. It was so close to the playground that they had a memorial service for the little boy at the playground. That was as close as they could get to the sewage sludge plant. Putting people in harm's way. That's what environmental injustices do to people on a daily basis, putting people in harm's way. In fact, I'm writing a book about Bridgeport, Connecticut, because I think Bridgeport, Connecticut is a textbook case of environmental injustice. Because I'm sure you know that Connecticut played a major role in the Industrial Revolution with not only inventions, but production of stuff. And to me, there's not a single spot of land that's uncontaminated in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Right now, the people who live at P.T. Barnum Housing Complex, right where they live, maybe that should be the name of the book, right where they live, there is a sewage sludge plant. There is Bridgeport Harbor Power Plant. There's Wheelabrator Incinerator. 95, a porta potty cleaning facility, a rock crushing facility, all where I consider on the same campus. So close. These people live so close to Wheelabrator that I drove from Hartford one day, and they were supposed to meet me there to meet with the folks at Wheelabrator, because I, like Harriet Beecher Stowe, I want them to see people as human. These are the people that are dying from this pollution. So we brought them to Wheelabrator, but I got down there and the parking lot was empty and I was very angry. I had fought through 45 minutes of traffic. And if you know what it's like to drive from Bridgeport to Hartford to Bridgeport, it ain't good. And I'm like, are you kidding me? They couldn't even get here on time? Well, I went inside and they were all inside. Nobody drove. They walked. They were that close. And we brought that to the attention of the folks at Wheelabrator. And one guy had tears in his eyes. He said, we never knew. He said, we get off the highway and get back on the highway. We don't even look back. And they don't. And that's a problem. Nobody looks back. Nobody realizes how what I'm doing affects other people. Even with climate change. Why is it that the environmental justice communities are the first and hardest hit by the ravages of the weather? Heat kills more people than the cold. Think about all the cold events and the hurricanes and the flooding and all heavy rain. The last heavy rain we had, several people in Hartford had their basements flooded with sewage from other towns because of the failure of the MDC to properly install combined sewage overflow valves in their basements. So I'm going to stop here because my time is out.
You're onto something, and I want you to finish it. No, I was just scratching the cards for me. Yeah.
Well, you know, you need to understand that just because you can afford it, not everybody else can. A lot of people still don't have cell phones. A lot of people still don't have computers. Because we've gone to COVID, you have no idea how many cell phone cards I've had to buy people so that they could be online, how many computers I give away all the time because people don't have computers. And you say, well, gee, you know, doesn't the federal government give away phones? You know, the common Obama phone? Oh yeah, but the time is limited. You might get 30 minutes a month or something. You know, some people can do that in 2 minutes, you know, 30 minutes, are you kidding me? So you have to buy extra time for that phone. So nothing is free, so don't think they get free phones. No, not at all, not at all. A lot of people don't even have air conditioning. And another thing, see, this is what I'm saying. I'm trying to make you understand that it's all connected to the environment. A couple of weeks ago, a young boy in Hartford was murdered. He was sitting on the porch at 2 a.m. What's he doing out there at 2 a.m.? I bet he was out there selling drugs. Well, if you know what I know, you would not say that. Because if you lived where they live, where the indoor air quality is so bad, you are sitting on the porch at 2 a.m. because you can't sleep. It's stifling. The fact that there's so much security on your building where your windows are shut, closed, there's no air circulation. Yeah, you are. How many times have you gotten up in the middle of the night and gone to a different room or turned the heat down because you can't breathe? Well, I do it all the time. So I don't know about you. Maybe it's because I live in Hartford. But don't assume that just because someone is in a certain location at a certain time that they're always into drugs. But this is the narrative that people want you to believe. The worst. The worst. I mean, I grew up thinking that, oh, you know, Black people don't love each other. Yes, they do. We do. Like people talk about the overprotective Italian mother. You haven't met my mother. To the day she died, she always told me she was in charge. And I was 53 when she died. She was in charge. In fact, I didn't curse until she died because she didn't allow it. She did all the cursing for everybody. Don't you dare even let her think you curse. What I'm trying to say is that we're just as human as everybody else. I want to be able to have a free and clean environment for my family. And no, it is not that we're all killing each other, but you need to also understand this. This black on black crime issue is much exaggerated. If I'm a criminal, and I'm a Black criminal, I would rob a Black person before I rob a white person. Because if I rob a white person, they're going to come looking for me. And as we say, when they catch me, I'm being put underneath the jail. If I rob a Black person, nobody cares. I'm still waiting on the police to come about a situation that happened to me this summer. And they're not coming. The police don't come to Black communities. So the situations escalate to the point where you have to take it out or do your own thing with your neighbor or with the person who's aggrieved you or the person who's stolen something from you because the police don't come. But if it's a white on Black crime, then the police do come. And let me give you an example. And please believe me, I am not lying about this. Years ago, we had a restaurant and there were two men fighting in the alley. So I got on the phone, I called the police, I said, you gotta come stop this. My mother grabbed the phone, she said, white woman being beat up by Black man. I swear to God, the cops, there were so many bright lights I couldn't see, just that quick. Fast forward, 4 years ago, my husband and I were driving on a street that's well known for drugs in Hartford. And we see these Black guys carry another guy to a car. And I thought the guy was dead. So I called 911 and I described what I saw. The dispatcher's doing everything she can to tell me why they could not come. My husband grabbed the phone from me and said, white boy looks like he's dead. Around the corner came a fire truck. Black lives don't matter. And you need to understand that all of these things are the reason why we are the way we are. The reason why it's okay for zoning boards to zone industrial where we live. The reason why it's okay to put a regional incinerator where we live. Because when we get sick, who cares? Just like the police don't come, who cares? You know, health insurance is driven by employment. So if you don't have a job, you don't have health insurance. People say, oh, well, you know, they have the state insurance, which is absolutely nothing. It is absolutely nothing. Different formularies for medications. I even had a doctor tell me once, oh, you got good insurance, I can give you this. The treatment, you go there with that little gray card for Medicaid, you sit for hours until they get to see you. And I'm not blaming the doctors because I realized it was the way that they're reimbursed. They're reimbursed $2 for a person on the gray Medicaid card. But if you have, you know, the Aetna or you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you might get $200 for that visit. So yeah, I'm going to take care of the $200 people, and the $2 people have to wait till it's their turn. And, you know, in certain areas where you live, if you go to a walk-in clinic, which closes down at 5 o'clock, then, you know, a lot of them don't have x-ray machines. A lot of them don't have what you need. So you're forced to go to the emergency room where you're there for 10, 12, 13 hours. And people, why are they always going to the emergency room? Because what's in my neighborhood is not adequate. It's not effective. That's why I'm at the emergency room. And my child can't breathe because my child has asthma, or the indoor air quality is so bad, but we still can't get any health care because it's so bad, non-existent. And things just get worse and worse and worse. Yes.
Thank you for that very powerful description of the context we need to be aware of. Can you talk about the solid waste problem in this area and its effect on the north end and the south end, and about the Dunkin' Donuts stadium and the development that's going on around there, and whether there's we ought to have on that.
Well, I'll start with the Mira. It's been around for over 30 years, and we've been trying to have it leave Hartford for over 30 years. But there's been much pushback, as you can well imagine, because nobody wants that in their backyard. Like I said, forget about the pollution. Look at all the other things go along with all those diesel trucks, hundreds of diesel trucks coming through your town, coming through your neighborhood. And if you are lucky enough to live en route, you see those trucks every single day. I'm surprised. Well, a lot of pets have been killed by trucks, but I'm surprised more children haven't been hurt by trucks who whiz by going to there. I'm very happy that Mira is closing down, but prior to the decision to close it, you need to understand that a couple of years ago, Mira has really not been adequate with regard to up-to-date equipment. And a couple of years ago, the turbines failed. And a lot of the trash that you all were sending to Hartford was still being sent to Hartford, but it was piling up in the yard, piling up inside. So you had another public health issue with the rodents and the smell and you wouldn't even allow that. There's no way you would allow that. You'd be the first one on television rioting. I can see you have them carry you away to jail, lie on the ground to stop a truck from coming. There's just no way. But we have no choice, because one of the issues that people don't understand is that the people are powerless. The people in environmental justice communities are never at those tables where the decisions are made, what to do, where to put it. Decisions are always made for the people, not with the people or by the people. And for as long as I've been in the environmental justice movement, we've been trying to prepare a place at the table for people, educating people, making them aware of their rights, making them understand the issues so that they can get there and say, no, 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 no. Waste energy, that's an incinerator. I found out that's what it is. We don't want that in my neighborhood. We don't want 500 trucks coming through. We don't want the air pollution. And did you know that Connecticut has 5 incinerators, by the way. 5 incinerators. The 2 largest ones, Hartford and Bridgeport, each are larger than the other 3. In fact, I don't know why this is true, but Hartford and Bridgeport will kind of vie for being number 1. I wouldn't want to be number 1 when it comes to the incinerator, but they want that distinction. And Bridgeport's located in a primarily African-American community, and so is the Hartford incinerator. Hartford incinerator should have been closed years ago because the equipment is bad, the pollution controls are not adequate, and yet nothing has been done until now.
Now, we're going to hear in a few minutes.
Yeah, I think that
We're going to hear from some West Hartford folks who are trying to get a commission set up in West Hartford. And West Hartford has a lot of say in those at those tables, because we're part of the NBC, we're part of CRRA or
Emira.
It's called CRRA. And so there's real opportunity for us to change that perspective.
I think there's a lot of interest here in that issue, and I don't think this is the last time we're going to talk about it and act on it. And I'm so sorry, Sharon, that was a wonderful presentation, because for me, and I think everyone else, it was real storytelling, and really you're a wonderful speaker, and we're just thrilled that you could create that picture in our mind, and we're going to continue with it, because it's, as you said, it's a
very
5-day
long
program.
It's very long.
And we want to bring on now, Susan, would you like to
Sure.
introduce the other 2?
Sure. The church's congregation has joined the Greater Hartford Interfaith Action Alliance. And we're just putting our toes in the water with this and learning how we can be a part of it and part of this metropolitan area, trying to make some change in the way people live in the city, but also in the suburbs. And so they've been a very effective group so far, and they're quite new. But we heard the other day that they had done some work with some students in West Hartford, and our ears perked up, and we thought, well, let's find out more about this, because it was around environmental work. And so I reached out, and we were in contact with Henry, say your last name, Melwood. And Henry is a professor at Tonson's. He teaches math, and so he's kind of been the adult in the room with working with some students, and he's going to tell us about that. And his daughter Isadora is here as well, and I think we have some folks on Zoom too who are going to talk to us about the work that they're doing. And Henry, could you all go over here so that the camera picks you up? Yeah.
Right here, or you go
Yeah.
Okay, so as Susan said, my name is Henry Millward, and I want to tell you a little bit about our group, West Hartford Climate Projects. First, let me just introduce us. On the webcam right now, we have Karina Chang. Can you say hello, Karina?
Hi, my name's Karina Chang. I am a freshman at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, but I grew up in West Hartford and I graduated from Hall High School.
And her brother, Andrew Chang, is also on.
Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm a senior at Hall High School in West Hartford.
And my daughter, Isadora Millward.
I'm Isadora Millward. I'm a freshman at Hartford High School.
And as Susan said, I'm a math teacher at Tonson's Community College and a West Hartford resident. Unfortunately, because of scheduling conflicts, we have 3 members tonight. We're 7 strong, but we have 3 members down because of various scheduling conflicts. One thing that we always get whenever we're presenting is like, how did you guys end up together? Because we're, a variety of ages here, a variety of schools, and we come from all different parts of the town. And it kind of really all started when I saw some of the other towns in the area, like Middletown, New Haven, Hartford, all pass climate emergency resolutions. And I decided, well, that's definitely something I would, hope my town would recognize the emergency that climate change is. But I had no political experience. I've never really been an activist or anything. And so I reached out to the only people in town that I knew that had ever done anything in terms of activism. And that was 3 middle school students that had worked. So you kind of pegged me as an advisor, but it's really the other way around.
Believe
I was
that.
the one that was asking for all the help. The 3 middle school students that unfortunately, they were middle school students. Now they're common sophomores. But when they were in middle school, they had done this Ban the Bag initiative, and one of them was a family friend. And so he got me hooked up with their team. When we started a little bit over a year ago, we started working on this climate emergency resolution and putting it together. And one of the things that happened was we started talking to more and more people in town that were also interested in climate. And Karina heard about us and asked if she could be part of the team. And we were like, oh, sure. And she's been going gangbusters ever since. And she brought her brother Andrew in. And then my daughter is the most recent installation. And I think she got curious at some point, who are all these random students I was talking to after dinner, like almost every night, in the house. So of course, if I had asked her, she wouldn't have joined, but they ended up asking her into it, and she's like, sure. So now she's part of the team. So we thank you here for the chance to speak and tell you a little bit about the resolution, and we're honored to follow you, Ms. Lewis. I was really incredibly moved by that.
Thank you.
Okay, Karina, could you tell everybody a little bit about what's in our resolution?
Definitely. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with climate emergency resolutions, I can now summarize the purpose of these documents and the contents of ours. So as Henry mentioned, these resolutions have been passed in 29 Connecticut towns. including Hartford, New Haven, and Middletown. And although each town has passed a resolution unique to their own town, the namesake of the document and the shared goal of all of them is to declare climate change an emergency and to prioritize climate change as a real issue and plan future action steps to address it. So in our resolution for West Hartford, we have 5 main goals. And the first one is we would like the town to declare climate change an emergency and to establish it as an official town priority. Second, we want West Hartford to create a West Hartford Climate Change Commission with voting youth representation. So this commission would take charge of initiating and catalyzing climate action, as well as helping implement the 100% clean energy plan that West Hartford recently passed. This commission would also serve to unite the existing town commissions and use their expertise to address climate change from each of their respective areas. Third, we would like the Climate Change Commission to conduct a greenhouse gas inventory to establish West Hartford's baseline carbon footprint. This data is really necessary to create accurate and achievable goals moving forward. And this commission will also author a climate plan by no later than December 2023 that will bring West Hartford to net zero emissions by 2050. And working alongside the Clean Energy Plan, like I mentioned, this plan that we're proposing will also tackle climate change through a broader scope in the areas of energy, town waste, transportation, and the built environment. Fourth, we want West Hartford to endorse national carbon pricing. And to be clear, we don't want this system implemented on a town level, but rather for West Hartford to support carbon pricing legislation on a national level. And fifth and finally, we want West Hartford to just view all of the town's activities and legislation through the lens of sustainability and climate change. So that summarizes the main points of our resolution. And now Isadora will go over the process of our journey so far and what our next steps are.
Thank you, Karina. To seek out multiple perspectives on our project, we have consulted a multitude of people, including Mayor Sherry Cantor, Town Manager Hart, Energy Specialist Catherine Deviney, and the Sustainability Task Force in regards to our resolution. We have worked closely with West Hartford's Clean Energy Commission throughout our whole drafting process. They give their support for the concept of our CER, and we also have written support from West Hartford's Conservation and Environment Committee. In addition to these 2 town committees, many town and state organizations have endorsed our CER, including the Hall Environmental Club, the Conard Environmental Club, the West Hartford Garden Club, Route to Rise, the Electric Vehicle Club of the CT, Blue Earth Compost, and Save the Sound. Save the Sound and University of Hartford Faculty Senate, Student Senate, and Sustainability Committee. Now you might want to know where we are in the process of getting this passed. Well, we just presented to the Community Planning and Economic Development Committee and got their approval to go on to the Town Council. And we are preparing to present to the Public Works Committee as well. This will all hopefully lead to a vote at Town Council either this December or January. We are so close. We just need your help to get over the line. Andrew, can you tell them how they can help us?
Sure. Thank you, Isadora. So if you like what you heard about this resolution, we could really use your help. Here are 4 ways you can support our resolution. First, you can learn more. So you can email us to chat and get a copy of our resolution. Second, you can reach out to us and we'd love to come talk to you or your organization, either in person or online. You can help us spread the word about our resolution through friends or on social media. And you can help speak up with us. So the final hurdle for our resolution is the town council meeting sometime in December or January, and we would love to see you there. There's a chance during each meeting to leave a public comment, and giving a public comment either by email or in person, it goes a long way with town council members to show that people really care about the environment and are on board with West Hartford passing a climate emergency resolution. So lastly, we thank you for the time you have given us today to present, and we hope to see you there at the town council meeting. Thank you.
And now, any questions that people might have?
So is December 14th the council meeting where it will be introduced?
We're hoping. We haven't got a commitment from the mayor or town manager yet on that, but we're.
But you'll keep us posted.
Yeah, I'll definitely let everybody know.
Facebook page?
No, we are working on a website right now. We're a little under, let's say, one of our areas we need to work on a little bit better is our social media presence and our web presence. So
Yeah, that would be huge. And even if you just put up a name and a picture, having a Facebook page that people can like, and then you get the word out, hey, on this date, we're all mobilizing, go to this place,
Yeah.
email this person, do this thing. I think that is a top priority.
okay,
Because word of mouth isn't good enough. You go click, like, share,
right.
link it.
Yeah. I'll have to, I'm a little old, but I'll have to up my social media game, which is about
That's a great idea. Another thing I forgot to mention is we actually have a petition that we can send to all of you, and it basically says that you support the passage of a climate emergency resolution, and it'll help us strengthen our presentation once we do reach town council.
Yeah, imagine how awesome it would be if we could share that link on Facebook and then Twitter and Reddit and Instagram and just spam people and like have it just go out into the ozone, you know, like we need to just have this link everywhere. How easy could that be? I mean, that's as much, like, you literally put a name and let people like it, and it's gonna go bananas.
You also might want to.
Oh, Hartford Live, that's a great idea.
Well,
What's
yeah,
Hartford Live?
yeah,
I haven't seen
or
that.
to come into West Hartford, for example.
Yeah,
okay. What's Hartford News? Current.
This is similar to recently there was a movement to make racism a public health.
Yeah, West Hartford passed that resolution.
So things that we could say are really rare to this discussion.
Yeah, that really paves the way. There also West Hartford passed declaration of support for the TCI legislation, the state level TCI bill. So yeah, I mean, I think the precedence is definitely there for these kind of resolutions, and we're just hoping. I know they're kind of looking for exactly the right time, but we're hoping, because the work is so important to do now, we're hoping that we get through town council in December instead of January.
Just want to make the comment, you do know that TCI is not supported by EJ communities.
Oh yeah, I have
wait, say that
heard,
again?
yeah,
The Transportation Climate Initiative is not supported by the environmental justice communities. And one of the things that I'm disappointed by is that the folks who are at the helm of the TCI program fail to bring that to people's attention. Because the cap and trade mechanism that is supposed to fuel TCI does nothing to reduce the tailpipe emissions in communities of color. There's numerous studies that have shown that emissions will actually go up in communities of color. So it's a really wonderful idea, but there's no guarantee that TCI will deliver on its promise for equity.
However,
And-
there is the advisory board that people that are in disadvantaged communities will join, and that 50% of the revenue coming in from TCI will be going to disadvantaged communities. So that is, and there will also be mechanisms to measure the amount of greenhouse gases in those communities on a routine basis.
Well, all that sounds really good, but so did urban renewal and all the other things that failed. I was at the beginning of the advisory board discussions. Last year, Katie Dykes called me Christmas Eve and asked if I would be involved. And I said yes, but I stepped down from the TCI program when I felt that it was, that there were many fake equity advocates who were talking and saying the right things, but what they were doing was not going to produce positive results. It sounds good to say that 40% of the revenue is going to be devoted to these communities, but Doing and saying are two different things. It sounds good to say that the people representative of the equity issue are going to be at the table, but when you talk about how it's going to happen, it's not. It's just not a feasible reality. So this is why I'm very disappointed in the fact that the TCI people are not making it known that the environmental justice community within the entire TCI region, the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic states, and DC don't support TCI, nor are they stating that Massachusetts just today said no. And there are what, 13 states and the DC. Do you know that 90% of them are not supporting TCI? So there's got to be a reason.
Well, I mean, there's also the issue of the wholesalers of gas, oil pushing back
And with the gas prices going up, and one of the things that was never contemplated in the TCI equation was COVID. When people stopped driving, then the TCI program really would have failed had it been in effect, because no one's driving. No one's buying the gas. Where's the tax going to come from?
well, this is a.
So, we need to stay in communication with you.
Mhm.
And we have the resolution that you sent me a link.
Yeah,
And maybe we can get that into the chat, and people can draw that down.
definitely. Yeah,
Good.
if you just email us, you can get a copy of the resolution and the URL for the petitions on the bottom page.
Are we reaching you when we email?
Excuse me?
Who are we reaching when we email?
It actually goes to all of us, and whoever's the first. There's 7 of us, so whoever's kind of the first. But if you know you're trying to reach Isadora, you just say Isadora, trying to reach me, Hendry. Yeah, Karina is William and Mary freshman. Yeah, she was a Hall High School graduate. It's funny, we
Anyone at Thompson's?
we have a sustainability committee there. Yeah.
Awesome, that's fantastic.
But please contact us.
Oh, for sure,
Okay.
yeah. Thank you.
And I think I saw Johannes had a question.
Yeah, well, I have a question about this, something I've been pondering. I mean, I'm all in favor of this, as you know, this climate emergency resolution, and I think it's good work. The worry I have is that it is perceived at times by people as greenwashing because it has no chief.
Yeah.
And so you declare this as a community, you stand by and that nothing happens.
Right.
You see this at schools, colleges, my own college.
Yeah.
We declared it 2 years ago, and people go about their business. But you can point to the fact that we stood in unison and declared this an emergency.
Well, I mean, you pointed.
So then the question is, okay, is this really, or maybe the real question is, how can you give this real teeth?
Well, I think the really the only way, and you're right, if like we pass the resolution and then we just kind of walk off into the sunset, nothing really happens, right? But these students are so dedicated to this that, you know, we've put a lot of things that really will help us move forward, like a climate plan, right? But a plan's only a plan, it has to be executed. A greenhouse gas inventory is a great idea, but it has to be executed.
And the charge, right, to keep track of emissions.
Yeah, you don't just want to do it once, but you got to monitor yearly to see if you're improving on your baseline footprint.
And the mission is your vehicle.
Yeah,
Right?
but you still, I mean, Johannes is right. There's tons of, you know, there's tons of wishful thinking that's going on, and Sharon pointed to earlier, you know, the fact that you know, even though that like 40% of the 4% were promised to underserved communities, whether the mechanisms there to get that 40% to those communities, that the devil's in the details. And at a high level, it all sounds good. And it's hard to know whether you're talking about greenwashing or you're talking about something that, you know, is really going to have an effect. But I think our team is dedicated to seeing this through even after the resolution passes.
But can I just say one more thing about
Mhm.
TCI and we'll stop?
Sure.
Were you aware of the fact, we're talking about people not being at the table? TCI had been discussed for 10 years before they even thought about bringing someone that they say that they want to protect at the table. I personally was kicked out of the way when I said, hey, what about me? Well, here's the information. You can go find it if you want. You can read it if you want to. I tried to find you, but I couldn't. 10 years. Now, those 13 states I mentioned, they also had 10 years to decide whether or not to get into TCI. And 90% of them chose not to. So this is what upsets me about the whole TCI Connecticut situation. Tell people the truth so they can make decisions. Say, this is a great program, but we do need Connecticut and New Jersey. We need New York and New Jersey. New York and New Jersey are not interested in joining TCI. How could Connecticut do it without New York and New Jersey? Tell people that even though we say it's going to benefit environmental justice communities by reducing tailpipe emissions that come through their communities, but EJ is not on board with this. Tell people the truth. That's all I'm asking. Connecticut won't do it. And it's not the commissioner's fault, because I will say, she had no idea that I didn't know anything about TCI until she told me. I'm like, what? What's TCI? Then I find out it's been discussed for 10 years. And when they thought she appointed me head of the advisory council, they all just went nuts. Now, I'm not making this up because people need to stop forwarding emails. That's all I'm saying.
I think it was a wonderful night. I learned so much, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
It was shared, it belonged to West Hartford.
Yeah.
And so it was shared with the whole group and I picked up on it. So.
Yeah. Johannes is part of the sustainability task force here in West Hartford. Yeah.
Bernie.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
actually, Bernie's not on it.
But he's on the email.
He's on the email.
Yeah. But he has other and bigger.
He's in the
things
Clean Energy
working
Commission.
on.
Yeah. We've got a group that's working hard on a lot of dimensions, because as big as climate change is, right? Climate change is bigger than energy, but then sustainability is a whole bigger hat than even climate change.
Oh.